Welcome back. We just spoke to Senator Marco Rubio. We now turn to his Democratic opponent, Orlando Congresswoman Val Demings. Before being elected to the House 6 years ago, Demings was the police chief in Orlando, and she has stressed her police background as a way of dismissing the issue she is soft on crime. But she has also been criticized for not accomplishing much during her time in office. We'll talk about all of that over the next half hour. I want to start with the news of the week, which was President Biden deciding to forgive about $10,000 in student loan debt. This has sort of been criticized on both sides. You know, some people believe that it didn't go far enough, that he should have been more aggressive. Others have suggested that this is simply, a tax break for those who are likely to do well financially on the backs of working class people. What is your opinion of the president's plan to forgive $10,000 of student loan debt?
Well, Jim, it was one of the president's campaign promises, and I think he is trying to fulfill that promise. But look, I have my own personal story with college debt. I remember when I went to college, I didn't know how I was going to pay for tuition, didn't know how I was going to buy books or pay rent. And so I applied for every loan that I could. Look, graduated with my degree, but was also saddled with college debt. And I can remember it took like a decade, Jim, before I was able to pay off that debt. Couldn't buy a home. My husband and I, we got married, but I couldn't qualify because I had this college debt that I had to pay off before I was able to do that. I applaud the president for trying to do something. I don't think it's sustainable. And I do think that we have to look more long-term. I think we really need to look at better monitoring and holding accountable those colleges and universities for what they are charging our sons and daughters to attend them. I've heard that college tuition has increased 3 to 4 times over the last 20 years. I think it's outrageous, and I think we really want our young people, right? If they're academically inclined, to go to college, or maybe they go to a community school and learn a skill or a trade. Either way, whatever career they decide, it should be accessible and it must be affordable.
But I just want to be clear. Do you support the president's plan to forgive $10,000? Would you like to have seen that number to be higher? Or do you think it's the wrong idea because it's simply putting it on the backs of working class people to pay for those who went to college?
Well, I think a lot of the people who went to college or are struggling to go to college are working class people. When I graduated and went to work for the state of Florida as a social worker, but struggling to pay college tuition, the state of Florida certainly wasn't paying a bunch of money. I was a working class person. So we know it's $10,000 in some cases, $20,000 for Pell Grants. I believe, as I said, that we have to do something. So I applaud the effort to do something, but I don't believe it's sustainable.
So I wanted to ask you about the search of the former president's home and whether or not you're at all concerned that this sets a very dangerous precedent that we might see in the future.
Yes, this is unprecedented. But Jim, we also know that there had been several attempts to try to retrieve those documents that just not result in getting the documents back. And so, there's still a lot that we don't know. In most active investigations, there's a lot that we do not know. But I was really glad that Attorney General Garland did come out and give us some information. He asked that at least the document, the warrant itself, be unsealed. There's still more that has not been unsealed, but the FBI, I believe, based on what I know and not having been there on the scene, that this was well thought out, well executed, well organized. The documents, confidential documents, and certainly as someone who is a member of the Intelligence Committee, I know what I have to go through to review confidential, classified documents. I believe the FBI did this one by the book.
When I interviewed Senator Rubio a couple of days ago, he held firm to his statement that he believed this was an unconstitutional search. I asked him what exactly was the constitutional violation. He didn't really identify one, but it's we've heard a lot of rhetoric about this. You know, Senator Scott has suggested that the FBI were using Gestapo tactics, likening it to the Nazis. We've heard other inflammatory comments directed towards the FBI and the Justice Department. Does that concern you? That the level of rhetoric? Yeah, talk to me about where you think that is right now.
It really does concern me because let me say this, that, you know, and I may have shared this with you before. One of my biggest disappointments as a former law enforcement officer going into politics is that there are too many people who will put politics over serving the people. Remember, I come from a public servant world, and I don't know what happened to let us all back the blue, because as I said, the FBI is the top law enforcement agency, and anybody who heard Senator Scott say that, or Senator Rubio say that, who compared them to a Marxist third world dictatorship, that is so crazy. But Jim, not only is it crazy, it's dangerous. And we've already seen the results of that with the attack on the FBI office in Ohio. So look, you can play your political games all you want to, but we never want to put people's lives at risk, whether that's ordinary citizens or the voters or the men and women who have sworn to protect us and defend us. So we need to knock it off.
I wanted to ask about the Inflation Reduction Act. You were supportive of it. You know, there was a fair amount of analysis. I think both the CBO and I think the University of Pennsylvania, their economists did a deep dive on it. They found that the act would very slightly increase inflation until 2024 and decrease inflation thereafter. These point estimates are statistically indistinguishable from zero, thereby indicating low confidence that the legislation will have any impact on inflation. Do you believe that the Inflation Reduction Act will actually do anything about inflation?
Well, if you said 2023, 2024, I mean, that's
until 2024, right?
Yeah, that's right around the corner, actually. But let me say this, Jim, as I travel my congressional district and as I now travel around the state, what I hear from people, yeah, they're concerned about the cost of goods and services. They're concerned about the cost of gas at the pumps. But one of the things that I hear about in just about every county that I visit is the cost of prescription drugs and the cost of healthcare. I've talked to seniors who say they have to cut their pills in half to stretch their 30-day supply to 60 days. I talked to a family of four. Daughter has juvenile diabetes, and this mom told me that it is cheaper for her to fly her family of four first class to Canada to buy her daughter's insulin than it is to buy it here in the greatest nation in the world. That is totally unacceptable. And so what I am experiencing and hearing on the trail, that there are a lot of families, a lot of seniors, a lot of people who find it welcome news to hear about the reduction of prescription drugs, the cap on insulin, but not even to mention holding corporations accountable. Imagine some of the richest corporations in this country not paying anything. I won't even say fair share, because the minimum that they will pay is 15%. That's a great start. But what about the historic aggressive provisions in this bill that will finally begin the process, I think, in a more aggressive way of dealing with climate control? And that certainly should be important to the state of Florida with the flooding, the intense storms, hurricanes, tornadoes, more and more that we are seeing here, and the jobs that come along with that. So while the Inflation Reduction Act, of course, is not perfect, but it is a good thing for Florida. And I've always said, if it's good for Florida, it's good for me. If it's bad for Florida, it's bad for me. I'm excited about this legislation.
When we come back, we turn to the issue of abortion. Welcome back. We now turn to the question of abortion, which is one of the clearest divisions between Demings and Rubio. More than any other issue, this has the potential to shake up not only this race, but races across the country following the recent Supreme Court decision striking down Roe versus Wade. What is your position when it comes to abortion? Is it up to the point of viability that a woman should be able to have that say over the future of that fetus? Or where do you come down? I'd like to get as specific as possible.
Yeah, and Jim, let me start here. I can't help but think about the women who were involved in the women's suffrage movement, and men were involved too. Through the years, people who have suffered, bled, and died for us to have the constitutional rights that we enjoy. I was disappointed, shocked and disappointed at the Dobbs decision. But what I also hear as I travel the state of Florida from women and men is that we're not going back to a place where women are treated like second-class citizens, women and girls, or that we're treated like property. I support abortions up to the point of viability. And as a former police detective and a former detective sergeant who investigated cases of rape, incest, and sexual abuse in the Crimes Against Children unit, and you know, before I joined the police department, I was a social worker working with abused, abandoned, and neglected children. For Marco Rubio to think that there should be no exceptions for our children, our daughters, 10, 11, 12, even in the cases of rape, incest, or abuse, and that they should be forced to carry the seed of their rapist is disgraceful.
Well, I just want to, when you say point of viability, is that 24 weeks in your mind? I guess I really do want to try to get a specific.
And let's not forget the healthcare portion that is involved in reproductive rights. Women should have the opportunity to counsel with their doctors, and their doctors, in the privacy of that doctor's office, should be able to make that decision. The doctor can tell us all what the point of viability is, but that's my position, that I support a woman's right to an abortion up to the point of viability.
You said before that you were shocked by the Dobbs decision, but in a lot of ways, we've seen this coming. I mean, the religious right has not made any secret over the fact that they have been working on this to get those justices onto the court that would do this for decades. What my question is was it a mistake for Democrats? And I realize you've only been in office 6 years, but was it a mistake for Democrats when they had majorities and could pass legislation to have not codified Roe into law earlier? Was this being left out there in part so that you would have a political issue to beat up against Republicans on?
You know, Jim, I think you're absolutely correct on that. 49 years ago, almost 50 years ago, America celebrated Roe versus Wade, a woman's right to choose, a woman's right to privacy, or a woman's right to make her own decisions. And I do think we celebrated and moved on to the next fight. I do think that it was a mistake. We now know that, don't we? That Roe versus Wade was not codified into federal law. And that's why the Women's Health Protection Act is so very critical. As you know, we passed that piece of legislation twice now out of the House of Representatives. It's sitting in the Senate, waiting for a vote. And that's why we need to pick up 2 more seats in the Senate so that we can pass the Women's Health Protection Act. But also there's a lot of other legislation, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, the Equality Act, the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women's Act. There's gun violence legislation. We know we passed some about a month ago now, I believe, but there was legislation sitting there before that that's waiting for a vote. And so we have a lot of work to do, but I agree. I mean, you asked the right question. I think we did make a mistake by not passing federal law to protect Roe.
I don't know if you've seen it, but Senator Rubio is out with a new ad today, where he's touting his accomplishments in terms of supporting the Paycheck Protection Program, talking about burn pit legislation to help support veterans. I want to get you to comment on that, but I also want you to take a moment, because one of the criticisms that that's being waged against you is that your legislative accomplishment record is somewhat thin. Can you tell me what you've accomplished in your 6 years in the House that merits getting a promotion to the Senate, in effect?
Well, Jim, it's interesting to hear the senator tout his legislative accomplishments, and also the two pieces of legislation, the Paycheck Protection Act, as well as the PAC Act that protects our veterans. The majority of the members of the House and Senate support those pieces of legislation. Why? Because it was the right thing to do. People were in trouble and they needed our help. And why it took so long, I think Senator Rubio with the PAC Act saw it as a political opportunity, because I really don't remember him pushing hard to get that done. But the bottom line is, look, I'm glad we were able to get it done. The American Rescue Plan, we did not have not one Republican that voted in favor of that legislation. And we know millions of dollars went to communities around the country to help police officers, firefighters, and medical workers or teachers. And so look, the difference in Marco Rubio and me is that my public service record began decades ago. He's been in political office since 1998. And I think it's funny that he, suggests, put my political record up against her political record. I will have been there 6 years at the end of December. But Jim, the overwhelming majority of the law enforcement, the legislation that I've passed has dealt with the safety and security of our nation, or to help law enforcement. The first bill that I sponsored was the Law Enforcement Mental Health and Wellness Act. We talk a lot about, how we need to engage in criminal justice reform, but we have to take care of the men and women who take care of us as well. The Protect and Serve Act, legislation that will help to law enforcement officers to better be able to do their job through digital technology. The Victims Act that will give funding, if you will, to smaller police departments to help them be able to investigate and solve homicides. We know that 50% of homicides in this country, it's a shocking number, go unsolved.
I'm curious if you believed that as an African-American Democrat running in a Senate race, if you needed to put extra emphasis on the issue of law enforcement, because you believe that as an African-American woman, you would be vilified as being anti-police, or you would be vilified as being pro-crime or criminal, or light on crime or easy on crime.
Yeah, Jim, I appreciate that question. Look, I don't have to pretend to be the police. I am the police. I spent 27 years there. I have said since I've been elected to Congress, and I said it before then, that look, I'm a police chief that's trying to get elected to Congress. And what we do know is that the voters in Orlando sent their police chief to Congress. And I think we make the mistake, and I know my opponent would like this, but do you know, Jim, when I was appointed chief of police, my husband was the first African-American chief of police. I was the first woman. People celebrated in this community, particularly the African-American community, because you know what? Historically, Black Americans have struggled, marched, advocated to have people who look like me in the ranks of our police departments. Black communities celebrate my accomplishments and my appointments. I think all communities do, but particularly communities that understand how difficult it was to, number one, get hired, and then to work your way up through the ranks to become the first woman chief of police in a male-dominated profession, and then have the support of the community that I needed, and the men and women at OPD working their butts off to lower crime by 40%. Look, all communities, including the Black community, they don't want to see less police. They want to see more police. They just want to be treated with dignity and respect, like all communities deserve to be. So for those who want to suggest that the Black community is anti-police, that's offensive and insulting. They want to be and deserve to be in safe communities too. And we worked our butts off to make sure in Orlando that all communities are safe. Now look, I'm proud of my law enforcement record. I'm pretty proud of my accomplishments. The daughter of a maid and a janitor who was told growing up I wouldn't amount to much. I was the wrong gender, wrong color. You might want to settle for something else, go to college, are you kidding? And yeah, I graduated with a ton of debt, but doggone it, I graduated and worked my way up through the ranks to become the police chief. We celebrate that in Florida.
Do you want President Biden to come down here and campaign with you?
Now, you know, what a perfect question to follow what I just said about being the daughter of a maid and a janitor. To have an opportunity for the President of the United States to maybe want to come down and help me. Wow, Jim, that's pretty cool. But let me say this for my opponent, because I know he will be watching. He said that his campaign was a disaster and he was begging people to help him. I know that he wishes that he was running against Joe Biden, or he was running against the sheriffs, or running against police chiefs, or running against anybody but Val Demings. Jim, if the president wants to come down and help me, the daughter of a maid and a janitor, he can come down and help me get my message out to Floridians about whether you're in rural Florida or whether you're in Miami-Dade, you deserve to have representation. But I'm going to do what I've always done in this race, Jim. I am running this race on my own energy, on my own record. I am earning my way. I'm not like Marco Rubio, who, look, the difference in us is this. When I am in the presence of the voters, whether people we consider really important or not are there, I consider it an honor to be in the voters' presence. Marco Rubio thinks that the voters should be honored when they are in his presence. So look, I'm running my own race. This race is between Marco Rubio and me, but anybody who wants to come and help me get my message out, this daughter of a maid and a janitor who the voters in Florida, my home state, has so graciously allowed me, nominated me to be the Democratic nominee for the United States Senate. Come on, let's get this done.
We'll be right back.